In 2005, a 19-year-old kid named Sami Kamkar brought down one of the biggest social networks in the world using nothing but a line of JavaScript hidden inside a CSS tag. For 1 million infected accounts in just 24 hours, only did for the one teenager. And that just attack number 1. So today, we're breaking down 5 of the most dangerous web security threats, for what they are, how they actually work, and the real world hacks that prove they are not just textbook problems. So before we proceed, let me introduce myself. So I'm Abdullah El Buddha, and today if we're going to talk about cyber security in a way that it actually makes sense. So next slide. So before we dive deep, here's the 5 attacks that we're going to talk about. So first, we have the XSS, or the cross-site scripting. Next is the SQL injection. Next is the CSRF, or the cross-site request forgery, session hijacking, and lastly, the information leakage. So now here's the key thing to understand right from the start, and this is what a lot of people get wrong. These are not all the same kind of attack. Each one targets a completely different layer of the web attack. So XSS goes after your browser. So in the other hand, SQL injections attacks the database. On the CSRFs exploit the HTTP. So HTTP protocol. In decision hijacking, it steals your identity token, and permission leakage quietly bleeds our server secrets. So think of it like this. So for a house that has multiple ways to break in, so there is a front door, back window, the attic. These are 5 different entry points. So same target, the web totally has different doors. So let's take them one by one. So first, let's talk about the XSS, or the cross-site scripting. So it is probably the most misunderstood attack type out there, because the name sounds like the attacker is scripting across sites, but that's not exactly it. Here's what's really happening. You visit a website, maybe a blog, a forum, or a comment section. That website has a text box where you can type something. Now, what if instead of typing a comment, someone types a JavaScript code? So if the website isn't careful about how it displays the info back to the other users, that code gets executed in every visitor's browser, not on the server. It is in your browser. So what can that code do? It can do lots of bad things. First, it can steal your authentication cookies, so that tokens that keep you logged in. So you can see it when you log in or visiting some of the site. So you can read it. It can completely rewrite what you see on the page, like replacing a bank's transfer form with a fake one. Next, it can redirect your phishing site. And lastly, here's the scary part. It can spread itself like a virus. So, which brings us to the real case. So, remember what I said in the when I said about the Sami Kamkar, 19-year-old kid. So the real cases that happens titled the Sami Worm, or the MyPeace.2005. So the kid only wanted to see how many friends he could get on MySpace. He found out that MySpace block obvious script tags, but he discovered you could snake JavaScript inside a CSS style attribute like this, as you can see in the PowerPoint. And he could hide the word JavaScript by splitting it across two lines, so the filter missed it. So he wrote a self-replicating script. When anyone visited an infected MySpace profile, the script ran in their browser. It added Sammy as a friend, then copied itself to their profile. In under 24 hours, 1 million infected profiles. MySpace had to take the entire site offline, and the FBI got involved, and Sammy faced federal charges. Alright, next up is the SQL injection, and this one goes deep, literally into the database. So here's the setup. Almost every website you use has a backend database. When you log in the site, it runs a SQL query, a database command, something like as you can read at the PowerPoint, it is the select from users with username. So that could, or that problem, if the developer didn't sanitize the input, an attacker can inject their own SQL commands into these fields, like the classic example type, or the, as you can read at the PowerPoint, the or 1 equals 1 as your password. Now the query becomes like the word username. So 1 equals 1 is always true. You're in. No valid password needed. And that's just the login bypass. So skilled attackers can go further than dump the entire user database, delete records, or even run commands on the operating system. Now, in a real case about this SQL injection, titled the Heartland Payment System, that 2008. So Heartland processed credit card payments for hundreds of thousands of merchants across the US. Attackers found SQL injection a vulnerability in their web application. It used it to plant malware on the internal network and silently exfiltrated data. And the result, 130 million credit and debit card numbers stolen, one of the largest data breaches in US history at the time, and over $140 million in fines and legal settlements. Here's the gut punch. It parameterized queries, a coding technique that's been standard practice for decades. So it would have stopped it completely, but the attacker's input would have been treated as data, and not as executable code. So use preferred statement always. There is no excuse in 2005. Okay, CSRF, or the cross-site request forgery. It is the trickiest one to wrap your head around. So let me walk you through it step by step. So first, a quick reminder about how web session work. When you log in a website, the server gives your browser a cookie. So a small token that says this is you, or every time your browser make a request to that site, it automatically attaches the cookie. That's how the site knows who you are. So now here's the attack. Step 1. You log into your bank's website, the cookie is stored. Step 2. You don't log out. You open a new tab and visit some random website, maybe a link someone sent you. Step 3. The malicious page contain hidden HTML. So it's a form that submits a request to your bank server that transfer money to this account. The form auto submits via JavaScript. So step 4. Your browser says, oh, a request to example bank.com. So let me attach that cookie, and it does. So the server says as valid cookie and process the transfer. So it thinks you authorize it, just like that. So you didn't click anything. You didn't enter your password. You just visited a page. This is what security researchers call the confused deputy problem. So the browser is trying to serve both you and the website, and it gets confused about who's actually making the request. So in a real case about the CSRF, it titled the Gmail in 2007. So security researcher Pitko discovered that while logged in into Gmail, visiting a malicious website could silently add email filters to your Gmail account. Filters that forwarded all your email to the attacker. So it gives no alert, no confirmation dialogues, just your entire inbox quietly being forwarded. This flaws was also found in ING Direct Bank, YouTube, multiple DSL routers, and Purdue University on web portals. The defense: CSRF tokens are a secret random value embedded in every form that the server checks. So the malicious site can't know what the value is, so it can purge the request. Also, the code or this as you can read, same site or equal strict cookie attributes tells browsers to never attach cookies to cross-site request. Problem solved. Alright, next up, let's talk about the session hijacking. So, session hijacking is what happens after an attacker gets their hands in your session token. So, here's the life cycle. You log in, the server creates a session ID. So, a long random string. So, the browser stores it as a cookie. So, every time every request you make, it includes that cookie. So, that the server uses it to identify that it is you. So, if an attacker gets that cookie, it is game over. Because they can send requests as you. The server can't tell the difference. So, how did they get it? So, there is a few ways. First, it is about the network sniffing. On an encrypted HTTP connection, the cookie travels in the plain text. Anyone on the same Wi-Fi can read it. Next is the XSS. It uses a script injection, just like I discussed earlier. It attacks to read the cookie from JavaScript. Then lastly is the session fixation. It uses to trick you into using a session ID if the attacker already knows. So this is actually how XSS and session hijacking connect. So XSS is often the tool used to steal the cookie. Then session hijacking is what that attacker does with it. So 2 attacks, 1 chain. So in a real case about the session hijacking, there is one case that I searched. It is about the Fireship in 2010. So a developer named Eric Butler built a Firefox extension and released it publicly. What it did on any open Wi-Fi network, it listened to unencrypted HTTP traffic and captured session cookies for Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Flickr, and 20 plus other major sites. Then it showed you a sidebar with everyone on the network who was logged in. So click their name, you're now logged in as them. But it required zero technical skill. A middle schooler, even a middle schooler could do it. So Fireship was downloaded over 500,000 times in the first week. It became one of the most important wake-up calls for HTTP's adoption. Within 2 years, major platforms started forcing HTTPs by default. The defense are straightforward. HTTPs everywhere It set the HTTP only flag so that JavaScript can't access the cookie. It set the secure flag so it only traverses over encrypted connection and expires session aggressively. And next, the last but not the least is the information leakage. So the last one on our list is different from the others. It's not a single dramatic hack. It's a slow drip, and it is often what makes every other attack possible. Information leakage is when a server accidentally tells you things it shouldn't. For example, the most obvious form, verbose error message. You type the wrong password and the site says user not found. Now you know the username doesn't exist, but you try again and it says wrong password. Now you know the username does exist. That's information the server shouldn't be giving you. There are more dangerous there are more dangerous, like the stack traces, that it is the errors that print out the server's file paths, database names, software versions, or even code snippets. It is a goldmine for an attacker. So there are other channels. First, the HTTP response headers that says server Apache 2.2.15. Now I know your exact version and can look up known vulnerabilities. So HTML comments left in the source code. So the timing attacks, how long a request takes can reveal whether a username exists. And the last is the browser fingerprinting, that your browser unique accommodation of fonts, extensions, and settings can track you even without cookies. Now let's talk about a real case that happened on about the information leakage. So it is about the EasyJet, or the title EasyJet in 2020. The UK airline disclosed that 9 million customers had their personal data exposed, including the travel itineraries and credit card details for about 2,200 people. Investigators traced it to the attackers who gained an initial foothold through misconfigured servers and information exposed through poor access controls, and then silently exfiltrated data over time without triggering alerts. So this is the classic pattern. Information leakage doesn't just hurt you directly, it feeds every other attacks. It is a reconnaissance. So you can learn the tech stack, find the CVEs, and build the exploit. Prevention is unsexy but essential. Never show a verbose errors in production. Strip server headers, keep your server paths, and implement a content security policy. Alright, before I wrap up, let's lock in the key differences, because this is what matters for an exam, an interview, or just actually understanding web security. XSS, or the cross-site scripting, it targets the browser layer. Remember that the attackers injects a JavaScript in the victim's browser, runs it, and defend with output encoding as CSP. Next, the SQL injection, it targets the database layer. So the attacker sends scripted input that becomes a part of a database query. So defend with parameterized queries. And next, this is RF targets the HTTP session protocol. So the attacker tricks the victim's own browser into sending a request. So it depends with RF tokens and SIM site cookies. And the decision hijacking targets the session token. So the attacker tells or predicts a valid session ID. So it depends with HTTPs and secure cookie flags. And lastly but not the least, the information leakage target the server's own output. So the server inadvertently reveals sensitive data. Depend with proper error handling and configuration hardening. Different targets, different techniques. different defense, they are related. They often chain together, but they are distinct attacks. So let's talk about the how the defending against all 5 attacks. So here are your takeaways. First, the XSS or the cross-site scripting, just encode your output. Never trust user input in HTML context. Second is that SQL injection, just use parameterized queries, no exception. And next is the CSRFs, just use tokens and SimSite cookies. Your browser auto attaches cookies, so you have to stop PORD's request server side. Fourth, session hijacking, use HTTPs and set HTTP only unsecure on cookies. Expire session fast. 5, and the last, information leakage, harden your error message, step your server headers, and don't let your site tell attackers more than it needs to. All word cases that I mentioned earlier, like the Worm, Heartland, Gmail, Parsec, and EasyJet, none of these were exotic nation-state attacks using 0 days. They were developers who didn't handle input correctly, didn't use HTTPs, or left error messages on in a production. That's all. There's a say, most breaches are not clever, they are preventable.